Three messages before we get started with today's show. First, where do you go to research domain name availability, look up current and historical Whois information, and find domain name sales history? Ever wonder which other websites use the same hosting resources that you do? DomainTools.com provides a complete picture of a domain name, from research to monitoring, and is trusted by more than 1 million members worldwide. Did I mention they'll monitor domain names for you for free? I just set up 2 domain name monitors myself today. Check them out, DomainTools.com. Second, do you have a domain name or website legal issue that you need help with? David Westlow provides legal representation for clients ranging from individuals to Fortune 500 companies in domain name transactions, whether they're disputes, trademark and copyright claims, or web hosting and content liability issues. As a former software and web developer himself, David Westlow understands your needs and goals. Whether it's a cease and desist letter, a UDRP case, or buying or selling one or more domain names, contact David Westlow at newmediaiplaw.com. That's newmediaiplaw.com. Finally, you know that being on page 1, the first page of results of a major search engine like Google or Bing, can drive exponentially more traffic than being on page 2 or worse. If you're a domain developer and you need immediate free advice to get your website to the top of the organic search results, will you go check out page2sucks.com? You heard me right, page2sucks.com. Here's your program. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the domain name authority. How do you, as a domain investor or entrepreneur, make your domain names work for you rather than you working for your domain names? Joining me to answer this question is Eric Borgos, owner of Impulse Communications. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You've been in the news recently for a couple of big domain names, and when I say recently, it's all relative. I'm looking back a couple of years until today. The first, back in January 2008, you sold Bored.com, B-O-R-E-D, as in I'm at work and I'm bored. You sold Bored.com and 170 other domain properties for $4.5 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the sale was really just Bored.com. And those other domains were kind of part of the Bored.com network, and the owner didn't really care about them, but they kind of were all linked to each other and some of the same content, and it didn't really help me to have those domains without Bored.com, so we kind of all made it part of the package, and we sort of valued it at $4 million for Bored.com and $500,000 for those other 170 names. I had kind of done like a chart with a spreadsheet with the income of those names, so if he wanted them, he could take them. If he didn't, he didn't. So we kind of I came up with, I guess, like $500,000 for them. So he didn't really care about them and probably didn't want to deal with them, but I told him it'd be kind of crazy not to take them because, like I said, there's like a lot of shared content. It was all a really good fit. And it was crazy not to just have them all.
Right.
So none of the domains themselves are really much value. It was just more a bunch of sites that got traffic that Bored.com linked to some of them just had, some of them were actually duplicates of content that were on Bored.com. So anyways, the main thing was Bored.com, that was the sale.
Okay, and I went on to Bored.com yesterday, and I know they've done some work on it since you've sold it back in January 2008, but it's basically a way, if you're bored, you can go kill some time. Like, I got on there yesterday, and I just clicked to a couple of games, and I found a Flash-based game where you can catapult some boulders at castles. I killed 15 minutes like that. I needed to turn off my computer, otherwise I wouldn't be able to go pick up my son on time from daycare.
Yep.
So was that the original intent of the website, to just help people kill time?
Yeah, definitely. It started back in 1997. Well, I mean, I've been picking up domains since like 1995, but most of the domains I got were ones people didn't pay their bill for. It was like domain dropping, but back then there was no automated programs to do it. And it wasn't really even a business of domain dropping. So I used to just have a little handwritten list, and I'd scribble down names that didn't work. And I could tell if it didn't work. I'd look it up and see when it might expire. And back then, there was no real rules about how long there would be, like how long a person had to pay the bill after it expired. So I was total guess of anywhere from like a month to 3 months. So every day, I'm on the East Coast, so I'd be up at like 5 a.m. checking all my list of domains, which is when Network Solutions used to take them away from the people and make them available. So Board.com was one of those names I got.
So when you sold, I'm sorry, Eric. So when you sold,
and with all those
Board.com,
domains I was getting, I didn't really have a use for them. But the Board.com was the only one I really actually set up a site on, because maybe 6 months later, a bunch of people were always asking me my favorite sites because they knew I was into the internet. And back then in '97, it was like a whole new thing back then, and people didn't know where to go. Like Google didn't exist or wasn't being used much, so people didn't know where to find stuff to do on the internet. So I just made a list for people and sent them asking, just like my bookmarks of my favorite sites. So Board.com just started off as a big list of links, and that's all it was for many years. It was a great name, but tons of people would go to it just because I would link to cool sites on the internet, and it was a way to waste time. But the problem with that is they were wasting time, and I was sending people to all the other sites, and they were making the money. So I didn't really make any money from it for maybe the first 3 or 4 years on it, just because I was sending traffic to all these other great sites instead. So I ended up changing it after a couple of years. So from the user's point of view, it looked the same, but instead of sending people to other sites, I sent them mostly to my own sites. And I would just create all sorts of things like games, like you said, or mostly other things. I'd sort of not copy sites, but just copy concepts of whatever people seemed to like, and make my own versions that were better, that I thought were better, or at least had more legitimacy. There are a lot of sites too back then that just had tons and tons of ads, or they go out of business, or they spyware. So it's just anything that I did internally, at least I know the site would be good and not try to scam people and not try to redirect people to bad, inappropriate stuff, because a lot of kids go to Board.com.
Sure. So when you sold the company, so it sounds like it was similar to a Yahoo.com, where these guys created the best links on the web. You were doing the same thing before the web was like the web that we know about. And when you sold the company, do you remember what your page views, unique visitors were on a monthly basis?
Yes, I was getting about 70,000 unique visitors a day to Board.com. So about 2 million a month. And I didn't do any advertising. I didn't really do any promotion other than, the promotion was that I didn't have any search engine specialists or anything like that. The only promotion was I would try to get links. I didn't do link trades, but I mean, each new thing I added to Board.com, I would maybe submit to the search engine using some search engine program or something like that. Basically, I just kept adding new content to Board.com, and it would get more traffic over time. And about half the traffic was type-ins.
Gotcha. So you had about 2 million unique visitors per month. How many page views did you have?
How many page views? I think it was about 6 million page views.
6 million. Wow. And do you remember what the revenue was for Board.com when you sold it?
Yeah, it was about $55,000 a month revenue, and I was making a profit of around $35,000 a month.
Wow.
So that's what kind of killed me to sell it, is that especially this was right before the economy tanked. So there were so many internet companies being bought for millions and millions of dollars at crazy prices where they weren't making any money. And I would have loved to sell for 20 million or some other domain name that I wasn't making money for 4 million. So the problem was I was making $35,000 a month profit for it. So the 4 million is a great price, but as a business, it actually wasn't a huge internet kind of price, because I pretty much now lost all my income. So it wasn't a no-brainer for me to sell it. But on the other hand, it was just, I figured it was worth, at the time, it was worth just cashing out. And I still had so many other businesses online and so many other domain names that I just didn't want everything to be virtual. So it wasn't that they hit some sort of target price or that I suddenly said to myself, I just have to get out because things are going to go bad. But it was just a way to kind of put some money in the bank and kind of not worry so much, and not every day of running a business with everything virtual. I was always worried about if my servers would go down, if a lawsuit would happen, if the internet would suddenly drop off the face of the earth and no one would care anymore about domain names. So it was just a way to kind of slow down a little.
Yeah. So we spoke in the pre-interview, Eric, that anything's on the table, and you're very open with a lot of your information, which I personally appreciate, and I know a lot of viewers are going to appreciate. So when you ended up selling the Board.com and the associated network for $4.5 million, what did you end up seeing in your bank account after your brokerage commission and taxes?
Well, the brokerage commission was, I don't remember. Well, after the brokerage commission and taxes, I basically had $3 million.
Gotcha. All right. How did it feel when you saw an additional $3 million in your bank account the day that the transaction closed?
Yeah, no, that was great. That's why I did it. I mean, up until that point, before that, I had about 200,000 in there, and as of like 2 years before that, I had pretty much zero. I mean, it's not that I had no money, but I was pretty much putting it back into my business. So I was making a good profit at the time because the $35,000 a month I was making, but I was investing it in other things or more into Board.com maybe. So I was paying off debt because like 2 or 3 years before that, I had up to like 200,000 in credit card debt from business things, and it was like 20% interest. And again, I was never doing badly because I always had millions of dollars in domain names that I could sell, and I was always getting offers, so I was always selling domains, plus I'm running sites. So I was never doing badly, but I never really had any extra cash. And I think that's the same with lots of businesses. I mean, I've been partners with some other businesses since then, and this is the problem, is that there's never, at least from the owner's point of view, there's never any extra cash. So even if you're making $35,000 a month, it goes somewhere. I mean, I don't have a fancy house, I don't have a fancy car, I don't spend money on going out hardly. I mean, you know, so it wasn't spent on that. But there just never seems to be any extra. So the only way for me to really have extra was to get that huge amount, that $3 million, and that was extra. So that, and basically, and then it's not just extra. It's not extra that I'm going to go spend to buy like a mansion or a yacht or anything like that. It's extra just to have in the bank and get interest off. So the biggest problem with all this is I had sort of figured that $4 million was a good number to replace my $35,000 a month income, because interest rates were 5% back then, to just stick it in a CD. And I didn't want to buy stocks, I didn't want bonds, just nice, safe things, because if I figured if I was going to, like, not gamble, but do anything risky, I might as well just keep Board.com, since it wasn't that risky, but at least I owned it, but it was still internet.
The devil you know, right?
I didn't want stocks or bonds because there was risk, and it turned out that was a horrible time to have stocks and bonds, so I'm glad I didn't buy stocks and bonds. So the biggest problem is interest rates went from 5% to pretty much zero. So my plan to just sit there and live off the money in the bank didn't work at all. So I'm sure rates will go back up again, so I'm not too worried. But for the last 3 years, I haven't made hardly any interest out of it. So I have been focusing more on business, although, I mean, I don't think I would not do business anyways, no matter how much money I had. So it wasn't a
So after taxes, the tax man came and took his share, and the brokerage fees, you had $3 million. Did you go out and treat yourself to anything? Buy a new car? Take an exorbitant vacation?
No, nothing like that at all.
Nothing like that?
Again, I mean, even before I started even really making a good amount of money on the internet, I always would just put stuff on credit cards. So again, I don't live expensive at all, but if we wanted to take a vacation, or if I wanted to, you know, just going out to eat a lot, things like that. So it never really, my lifestyle hasn't really changed in 15 years at all. I mean, I used to put all those domain names I was buying back in the 90s on credit cards and hope I'd pay them by whatever, selling them or putting content on them, which I eventually did. So it hasn't really changed anything. No.
All right. Well, I want to get into some of those.
If anything, I worry more because, again, I don't, even though I have a lot of money in the bank, I'm not really making any income because there's zero interest, and pretty much all my income is gone because the $35,000 I was making, at that time I had 15 people working for me, part-time or full-time. At one point I had up to 50 dedicated servers. Even though Board.com was kind of just one server, again, all those other sites, and just, I was always doing new sites. So I kind of just, I started off with like 3 or 4 servers and one would crash. So I just kept, every time I do something new, I'd add a new server just